Some crimes explode into public view. Others unfold quietly, piece by piece, before anyone realizes something is terribly wrong. This story begins on a warm summer morning in July, in South Boston, a neighborhood where people felt safe enough to jog before sunrise, walk to work in the dark, and leave their doors unlocked just a little too often. On July 23, 2013, Amy Lord woke up believing it would be an ordinary day. She was 24 years old, a recent college graduate, new to Boston, focused on building a career in marketing and communications. She lived alone in a South Boston apartment and worked for a nonprofit organization downtown. Friends described her as responsible, cautious, and kind, not reckless, not impulsive. That morning, Amy never made it to work. By itself, that was strange. Amy was known for being punctual, reliable, predictable. By mid-morning, her manager tried calling her. No answer. Then a second call. Then a third. By noon, concern turned into alarm. And while her co-workers were beginning to worry, something far darker was already unfolding across the city. Because Amy wasn't missing, she was being forced to move. At approximately 5:30 a.m., a black Jeep pulls up to a Bank of America ATM in South Boston. Security cameras activate automatically. The engine remains running. A man is in the driver's seat. Amy steps out of the passenger side. At first, the footage looks routine until you notice her face. Her left eye is swollen. Her cheek is bruised. Her movements are stiff, mechanical. She approaches the ATM quickly, almost mechanically, as if she's been rehearsed. She withdraws cash. Then she turns slightly and holds the money up, clearly showing it to someone off camera, the driver. Then she gets back into the Jeep. Minutes later, another ATM, then another. Over the next several hours, Amy is forced to visit multiple ATMs across South Boston, draining her bank account. Each time, the footage tells the same story. She never drives. She never speaks. She never hesitates. And each time, her injuries appear worse. Detectives would later say the footage was chilling, not because of what happened, but because of how controlled it all looked. This wasn't panic. This was fear under command. While Amy is being driven from ATM to ATM, another woman is walking to work. Her name is Alexandra Cruz. It's just before dawn. The streets are quiet. She hears footsteps behind her. Then, an arm around her neck. She's dragged into a parking lot. She fights. She screams. She loses consciousness. When Alexandra wakes up, she's bleeding, bruised, alone. Her attacker is gone. She survives, and she gives police something crucial. A description. She remembers his face. She remembers his build. And most importantly, she remembers a mole on his lip. At the time, detectives don't yet know that Alexandra's assault, Amy Lord's disappearance, and what comes next are all part of the same violent chain that by late morning, Amy's family has been contacted. They rush to Boston. Police search her apartment. There's no sign of forced entry, no signs of a struggle, but her car is missing. Then, just after 8 a.m., another call comes in. A vehicle is on fire in a parking lot. Firefighters extinguish the flames. The car is burned beyond recognition, but the license plate survives. It's Amy Lord's Jeep. At this point, police know the truth. This isn't a disappearance. It's a kidnapping. And whoever took Amy didn't just want her money. They wanted time. Later that afternoon, police searching a wooded area near a cemetery make a discovery. A body. It's Amy. She has been beaten, stabbed repeatedly, left naked. The violence is excessive, personal, but one detail remains. Around her neck is a necklace, angel wings, the same necklace she wore every day. The city of Boston changes overnight. News breaks fast. Women are warned not to walk alone. Residents are told to stay indoors after dark. South Boston, usually busy and social, becomes quiet. But the violence isn't over. That same night, another young woman finishes work. Her name is Kaylee Ballantyne. She recently moved to Boston from Maine. Ambitious, athletic, independent. She takes the subway home, just like she's done dozens of times before. She reaches her apartment building. She unlocks the door, and inside the hallway, she's attacked. She's stabbed repeatedly, left bleeding on the floor. Her roommate finds her moments later. Kaylee is alive, but barely. At the hospital, doctors fight to keep her conscious. And then Kaylee says something that chills everyone in the room. He's here. Police think she's confused. Then hospital security confirms it. A man has checked himself into the emergency room. He claims he was in a fight. His hands are covered in blood. The hospital goes into lockdown. Police move in. They arrest Edwin Alamani, 28 years old. Over the next several days, investigators reconstruct Edwin Alamani's movements. What they uncover is staggering. In less than 22 hours, he attacked Alexandra Cruz. He kidnapped Amy Lord. He forced her to withdraw cash. He murdered her. He burned her car. And then he attacked Kaylee Ballantyne. Surveillance footage places him everywhere. Buying gasoline, using Amy's money, driving her Jeep. Forensic evidence seals it. Amy's DNA is found on his shoes. Blood evidence connects him to Kaylee's attack. There is no doubt. As the case moves toward trial, the question becomes unavoidable. Who is Edwin Alamani? His defense paints a picture of a deeply disturbed man. They claim he suffered from severe mental illness, that he experienced dissociation, that he didn't understand right from wrong. Prosecutors see something else. A man who avoided cameras, controlled victims, hid evidence, destroyed property, tried to evade responsibility. These are not the actions of someone unaware. These are the actions of someone calculating. The trial grips Boston. Naked. The violence is excessive, personal, but one detail remains. Around her neck is a necklace, angel wings, the same necklace she wore every day. The city of Boston changes overnight. News breaks fast. Women are warned not to walk alone. Residents are told to stay indoors after dark. South Boston, usually busy and social, becomes quiet. But the violence isn't over. That same night, another young woman finishes work. Her name is Kaylee Ballantyne. She recently moved to Boston from Maine. Ambitious, athletic, independent. She takes the subway home, just like she's done dozens of times before. She reaches her apartment building. She unlocks the door, and inside the hallway, she's attacked. She's stabbed repeatedly, left bleeding on the floor. Her roommate finds her moments later. Kaylee is alive, but barely. At the hospital, doctors fight to keep her conscious. And then Kaylee says something that chills everyone in the room. He's here. Police think she's confused. Then hospital security confirms it. A man has checked himself into the emergency room. He claims he was in a fight. His hands are covered in blood. The hospital goes into lockdown. Police move in. They arrest Edwin Alamani, 28 years old. Over the next several days, investigators reconstruct Edwin Alamani's movements. What they uncover is staggering. In less than 22 hours, he attacked Alexandra Cruz. He kidnapped Amy Lord. He forced her to withdraw cash. He murdered her. He burned her car. And then he attacked Kaylee Ballantyne. Surveillance footage places him everywhere. Buying gasoline, using Amy's money, driving her Jeep. Forensic evidence seals it. Amy's DNA is found on his shoes. Blood evidence connects him to Kaylee's attack. There is no doubt. As the case moves toward trial, the question becomes unavoidable. Who is Edwin Alamani? His defense paints a picture of a deeply disturbed man. They claim he suffered from severe mental illness, that he experienced dissociation, that he didn't understand right from wrong. Prosecutors see something else. A man who avoided cameras, controlled victims, hid evidence, destroyed property, tried to evade responsibility. These are not the actions of someone unaware. These are the actions of someone calculating. The trial grips Boston. Graphic evidence is presented. Surveillance footage is played in court. Jurors watch Amy's final hours unfold frame by frame. Kaylee Ballantyne testifies. She survives the cross-examination. She survives the memories. And then she does something no one expects. She wears an angel wing necklace, the same one Amy wore. "She's my guardian angel," Kaylee tells the court. "She helped me fight." The jury deliberates. They reject the insanity defense. The verdict comes back. Guilty. First-degree murder. Edwin Alamani is sentenced to life in prison without parole. He will never be free. Years later, his appeals fail. The conviction stands. Kaylee survives, but life is never the same. Amy Lord's family continues to honor her memory. South Boston remembers the summer when everything changed. This case isn't just about violence. It's about how quickly normal life can fracture, how random evil can be, and how survival can sometimes be the most powerful form of justice. Amy didn't survive, but her story stopped something worse. because Kaylee lived, and because the chain of violence ended with her survival. Some true crime stories end with fear. This one ends with resilience, and a reminder that sometimes the bravest thing a victim can do is lie. The arrest brought relief, but it didn't bring answers, because once the handcuffs were on Edwin Alamani, investigators realized something unsettling. This wasn't a crime of impulse. It was a crime of momentum. Detectives began pulling apart his life hour by hour, tracing not just what he did, but how long he had been unraveling. Edwin Alamani was 28 years old, a Boston native, raised in the same neighborhoods, now terrified of him. On the surface, there was nothing remarkable about him. No long criminal record, no history that screamed predator. But beneath that surface, prosecutors would later argue, was a pattern of escalating violence, and a man who had learned how to hide it. Friends described him as withdrawn, quiet, emotionally distant. Others said he struggled with depression for years, that he drifted between jobs, that he isolated himself. But none of that explained what happened next, because in the days leading up to July 23rd, something changed. Witnesses would later recall seeing Edwin pacing, agitated, restless. And then, in less than a single day, 3 women crossed his path. 2 survived, 1 did not. Before Amy Lord ever stepped into that ATM frame, before her car was burned, before the city locked its doors, there was Alexandra Cruz. Her assault happened early, quietly, in the kind of space people pass every day without thinking twice, at a parking lot. Near home, near safety. Investigators would later say Alexandra's survival changed everything, because she remembered details most victims don't get the chance to notice. The mole on his lip, the way he moved, the way he fled. Her statement sat in a police report for hours, until suddenly, it wasn't just an assault. It was the beginning of a timeline. Amy Lord's kidnapping confused detectives at first. If this was robbery, why not take the money and run? Why force her to go ATM to ATM? Why keep her alive? The answer, prosecutors believed, was chilling. Edwin didn't want speed. He wanted control. The footage showed it. The way Amy waited for permission. The way she showed the money. The way the engine never turned off. This wasn't frantic. It was deliberate. And when the money was gone, the control ended. After Amy was murdered, Edwin drove her Jeep to a parking lot. Surveillance cameras caught him purchasing gasoline shortly before. Investigators believed the fire wasn't about hiding the car. It was about erasing the day, destroy the vehicle, destroy the timeline, destroy the evidence. But fires don't erase everything. License plates survive, footage survives, DNA survives, and Edwin made a fatal mistake. He didn't stop. Kaylee Ballantyne was never meant to live. That's the truth prosecutors would later acknowledge. She fought harder than Edwin expected. She screamed. She resisted. She survived long enough to be found. And when Edwin walked into that hospital, hands bloody, story rehearsed, he didn't realize the chain was already tightening. Because Kaylee wasn't confused. She wasn't hallucinating. She knew exactly who had attacked her, and she knew he was close. Hospitals don't lock down often, but that night, doors were sealed. Security was posted. Police flooded the building. Edwin Alamani was arrested without resistance. And for the first time in nearly 22 hours, the violence stopped. At trial, the defense tried to tell a different story. They claimed Edwin was disconnected from reality, that he dissociated, that he didn't understand what he was doing. But the evidence told another story. A man who avoided cameras, who changed clothes, who bought gasoline, who checked himself into a hospital. Those aren't the actions of someone unaware. They are the actions of someone adapting, calculating, and the jury saw it. Kaylee Ballantyne didn't know the court anything, but she stood anyway. She faced the man who nearly killed her. She spoke clearly, steadily. She talked about the pain, the fear, the aftermath, and then she talked about Amy, about how a stranger's strength became her own, about how survival carries responsibility, not to forgive, not to forget, but to live. After the sentencing, South Boston slowly returned to normal, but not completely. People locked their doors more often. Parents worried longer. Women checked behind them at night. And Amy Lord's name never disappeared, because some cases don't fade. They imprint. The justice system closed the case. But the story didn't end there, because the aftermath of violence isn't measured in verdicts. It's measured in the lives that continue, and the ones that don't. Part 3 will examine the appeals, the psychological aftermath for survivors, and why this case is still referenced today as a warning, not just a tragedy. Because the most dangerous part of this story was how ordinary the beginning was. The verdict ended the trial. It did not end the story. When Edwin Alemany was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, many believed the nightmare was over. That justice had sealed the damage inside a courtroom transcript and a prison sentence. But justice does not rewind time, and it does not repair what violence leaves behind. For the families, the survivors, and the city itself, the real consequences were only beginning. Life without parole is the strongest sentence the Massachusetts justice system can impose. It means no release, no reconsideration, no second chance decades later. The judge spoke carefully. This was not a crime of momentary loss of control. It was a sustained, calculated spree. Edwin Alemany would spend the rest of his life in prison. But even as the gavel fell, there was no sense of closure. Because a sentence does not restore a life, Amy Lord's family returned home, carrying something no family should ever have to carry: a future without their daughter. They remembered her as meticulous, gentle, quietly determined. She was the one who called to check in, the one who planned ahead, the one who never missed work. And now, their memories were fused with surveillance footage, courtroom photographs, and a necklace that became a symbol far beyond their family. They chose not to turn Amy into a headline. Instead, they focused on honoring who she was, not how she died. But grief does not respect intention. It arrives unannounced, in ordinary moments, in empty rooms. For Kaylee Ballantyne, survival became a complicated victory. She lived, but her body remembered everything. Recovery took months. Physical therapy, surgical scars, chronic pain, and then there was the psychological aftermath. Hypervigilance, nightmares, a fear of enclosed spaces. Doctors call it post-traumatic stress. Survivors call it never feeling normal again. Kaylee had to relearn how to trust routine, how to walk into buildings without scanning corners, how to sleep without listening for footsteps. And yet, she chose visibility. She spoke publicly. She refused silence. Because survival, to her, carried responsibility. Years after the trial, Kaylee continued to speak about Amy, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She wore the angel wing necklace as a reminder, not of fear, but of connection. Two strangers bound by violence. One who didn't survive, one who did. And in speaking, Kaylee did something powerful. She reclaimed the narrative. Edwin Alemany did not accept the verdict quietly. His legal team filed appeals. They argued ineffective counsel, improper jury instructions, errors in the handling of psychiatric testimony. They attempted to reopen the question of insanity. Once again, the courts reviewed the evidence. And once again, the conclusion was the same. Edwin knew what he was doing. The planning, the evasion, the destruction of evidence. These were not the actions of someone disconnected from reality. The Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court upheld the conviction. The sentence stood. The door closed, permanently. South Boston changed after 2013. Not visibly, not dramatically, but subtly. People locked doors they once left open. Neighbors checked in more often. Routine was no longer taken for granted. Women altered schedules, avoided empty streets, texted friends when they arrived home. The fear faded slowly, but the memory remained. This case did not involve elaborate schemes. No long-term stalking. No dramatic build-up. That is precisely why it lingers. Because the danger was ordinary. A walk to work. A ride home. A quiet morning. Nothing felt unsafe until it was. And that is what unsettles people most. Experts who later studied the case focused on one word: control. Edwin's actions were not random. They were structured. From the ATM withdrawals, to the controlled movement, to the calculated destruction of evidence. Everything pointed to dominance, not desperation. Understanding this matters, because it reframes how we think about danger. Not all violence is explosive. Some of it is quiet, methodical, and hidden in plain sight. Alexandra Cruz survived. Kaylee Ballantyne survived. Their survival mattered, because it gave police details, because it broke momentum, because it stopped what could have continued. History often focuses on perpetrators. This case demands focus on resistance. Had Alexandra not remembered the mole, had Kaylee not survived minutes longer, had Edwin not walked into that hospital, the outcome could have been far worse. True crime is often framed as inevitability, This case proves the opposite. Seconds mattered. Details mattered. Survival mattered. Edwin Alamani sits in a cell, but the story lives outside those walls. In advocacy, in memory, in caution, Amy Lord's life continues to matter, not because of how it ended, but because of how it changed others. This was not just a crime spree. It was a fracture in normal life, a reminder that danger does not announce itself, and that survival is not always about strength. Sometimes it's about endurance. Part 4 will explore how media coverage shaped public fear, why this case still resurfaces years later, and what it teaches us about recognizing danger before it explodes. Because the most unsettling truth of all is how quietly it began. Every true crime story leaves behind a silence, not the quiet of an empty courtroom, not the stillness of a prison cell, but the silence that settles into ordinary life once the headlines fade. For South Boston, that silence arrived slowly. In the weeks after the sentencing, news trucks disappeared from the neighborhood. Court documents were archived. Broadcasts moved on to the next case. But for the people who lived there, nothing felt finished. Residents still remembered the summer mornings that suddenly felt dangerous. The nights when footsteps echoed a little louder. The instinct to look over a shoulder that once stayed relaxed. Fear doesn't vanish when a verdict is read. It recedes. Quietly. The media called it a crime spree, a label that suggested chaos. But chaos wasn't what frightened people. What terrified them was how controlled it all was, how ordinary the settings were, how quickly routine became lethal. The coverage focused on the brutality, as it often does. But over time, the story shifted. From fear to reflection. Years later, this case still appears in documentaries, podcasts, and true crime discussions. Not because of spectacle, because of proximity. Nothing about this story feels distant. It didn't happen in an abandoned place. It didn't involve secret worlds. It happened on sidewalks, in hallways, at ATMs millions of people use every day. That familiarity makes it unforgettable. For too long, true crime centered perpetrators. This case shifted that focus. Alexandra Cruz is remembered for her detail, for the mole that mattered. Kaylee Ballantyne is remembered for her survival, for her voice, for her refusal to disappear into silence. And Amy Lord is remembered not as a victim, but as a young woman whose life mattered deeply, not because of how it ended, but because of who she was. This story teaches uncomfortable truths. That danger does not always look dangerous. That violence can hide inside routine. That control can be quieter than panic. It teaches us that safety is fragile, and that awareness, not fear, is what saves lives. Edwin Alamani will never be released. But justice is not symmetry. A life sentence does not equal a life lost. A verdict does not equal closure. Justice, in this case, came in pieces. In survival, in accountability, in remembering. Amy Lord's name continues to be spoken. In stories, in warnings, in moments of pause when people double-check doors or wait for a friend to get home safely. Her life became part of a larger conversation about safety, awareness, and the cost of underestimating ordinary danger. And that is a legacy no prison sentence can erase. Some crimes are loud. This one whispered. It slipped into a summer morning, into routine, into familiarity, and it left behind a truth that still unsettles us. That the most dangerous moments in life are often the ones that look the most normal. Amy Lord did not survive, but her story ended something worse. Because two women lived, because a city paid attention, because silence did not win, and because remembering is its own form of justice. This is not just a story about violence. It is a story about survival, and about why we tell these stories at all.